Welcome back to the Daily News Roundup. We've got a lot to cover today, so let's dive right in.
All right, sounds good. Let's kick things off in the Middle East. After 15 months of conflict, there's finally some hope in Gaza. Israel and Hamas have agreed to a temporary ceasefire.
15 months is a long time. This must be a huge relief, especially for the hostages and their families.
Absolutely. The deal includes the release of 33 hostages in exchange for 1,890 Palestinian prisoners. It was a really tough negotiation.
Can imagine.
Hamas was initially pretty reluctant, but they finally agreed just minutes before the deadline. The agreement has three phases. First, Israeli forces will gradually withdraw from Gaza. Then the hostage exchange will happen.
And then hopefully a lasting peace.
Right. The third phase is talks for a permanent ceasefire. Of course, there's a massive humanitarian crisis in Gaza to deal with, too. 90% of the population is displaced.
That's a staggering number. Okay, shifting gears to the U.S. now. The Supreme Court has upheld a ban on TikTok. What does this mean for the millions of users here?
Well, it's a big deal. The ban impacts something like 170 million users in the U.S. It all started with concerns about, TikTok's Chinese ownership and data security.
Yeah, that's been in the news for a while.
And now the incoming Trump administration is under pressure to find a solution.
What are the options?
Well, TikTok has been fighting hard to avoid a shutdown. A sale to a U.S. company is one possibility, or the government could intervene, maybe delay, or even try to overturn the ban. We'll have to see what happens.
Definitely a story to watch. Now to some somber news from Iran. Two senior Supreme Court judges were assassinated in Tehran.
Yeah, this is a disturbing development. Both judges had long careers, and they were known for their role in, crackdowns against government opponents.
So the motive could be political.
It's possible, but we don't know for sure yet. The attacker, by the way, wasn't connected to any cases the judges had heard. He actually killed himself while fleeing the scene.
Tragic all around. Meanwhile, in Ukraine, the conflict continues. A Russian missile strike just killed 3 people in Kyiv.
Yeah, the missile hit a business center. A forensic expert on the scene identified it as an Iskander-M ballistic missile.
Those are pretty serious weapons.
They are. And they're fast, which makes them really hard to detect and intercept. This attack has a lot of people worried, especially with the new Trump administration coming in. Their stance on Ukraine and U.S. support is still unclear.
A lot of uncertainty there.
Yeah.
All right, let's move on to Nigeria, where there's been a terrible tanker explosion. 77 people were killed.
It's a really awful story. People were rushing to collect spilled fuel from the tanker. Apparently, fuel prices have gone up recently, and, some people are desperate.
It's a tragedy, and these kinds of explosions, they're not uncommon in Nigeria, are they?
Sadly, no. Often it's because of poor road conditions or problems with the tanker trucks themselves. It's a reminder of the economic struggles that many people in Nigeria are facing.
Let's go to Spain now, where there's been a chairlift accident at a ski resort in the Pyrenees.
Yeah, 10 people were injured, a pulley failed, and some of the chairs fell to the ground. 2 young women, 18 years old, they're in intensive care.
I hope they'll be okay. Authorities are investigating, I assume.
Yes, they've closed the resort while they try to figure out what happened and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Good. Now to Peru, where a statue of the conquistador Francisco Pizarro has been reinstalled after 20 years. That sparked quite a bit of controversy.
Yeah, Pizarro is a very controversial figure. Indigenous groups see him as a mass murderer, basically, responsible for the deaths of countless indigenous people. Others, though, they argue that the statue is part of history, even if it's, uncomfortable.
A complex issue for sure. Okay, from Peru, let's move on to Sudan. The situation in El Fasher in Darfur sounds really dire.
It is. The last remaining hospital in the city is under siege. They're being shelled constantly.
That's awful.
It's hard to even imagine what the medical staff are going through, performing surgery during bombings, fearing for their lives every minute. They're incredibly brave.
And this is the only hospital for how many people?
It's the only one for the entire city, which is under siege, and for a nearby refugee camp as well.
Okay. Bringing it back to the U.S. now, the incoming Trump administration has announced that they'll begin raids to detain and deport undocumented migrants.
Right, starting Tuesday. And they're specifically targeting sanctuary cities, the ones that try to limit cooperation with federal immigration
So
authorities.
this is part of his mass deportation program that he promised during the campaign.
Exactly. It'll definitely be challenged in the courts, and it's going to reignite the debate over immigration policy in this country.
I'm sure of it. Okay, more Trump news. He's launched his own cryptocurrency.
He has. It's called Trump.
Catchy.
It's what they call a meme coin, and it's already worth billions of dollars just hours after launch.
Wow.
Meme coins are incredibly volatile, though, and a lot of people are saying it's, maybe unethical for a former president to be, profiting off his political position like this.
Interesting point. There's also a lot of talk about his new official portrait.
Ah, yes. Taken by Daniel Torok. It's getting attention because it's so, serious, almost ominous. Very different from the portrait he had done in 2017.
I guess you could say his image has evolved.
You could. The
Yeah.
lighting, the composition, it all creates an unsettling feeling. People are debating what kind of message it's supposed to send.
Intriguing. And finally, thousands of people marched in Washington, D.C. today to protest Trump's return to office.
Right, they're calling it the People's March, organized by a bunch of different groups, all concerned about, what they call Trumpism. It wasn't as big as some of the earlier anti-Trump marches.
Still, a sign that the opposition is still there.
Yeah.
Well, let's end on a more hopeful note. There's been a pretty amazing scientific discovery.
Oh, yeah, this one's exciting. Scientists have found these metal lumps on the ocean floor that are producing oxygen.
On the ocean floor.
Yeah.
But isn't there no sunlight down there?
Exactly. That's what's so wild about it. It's completely dark. They're calling it dark oxygen.
So how is that even possible?
Well, that's what they're trying to figure out. It really challenges our understanding of, where life can exist. If it can happen here in these extreme conditions, it could be happening on other planets and moons too, even without sunlight.
That's mind-blowing. It could change how we search for extraterrestrial life.
Absolutely. But it also raises some concerns. There's a lot of interest in deep sea mining these days. These metal nodules are rich in valuable minerals.
Right, I've heard about that.
But now we have to think about the potential impact on these ecosystems. We need to find a way to balance resource extraction with protecting these newly discovered life forms.
It's a lot to consider. Well, it seems like every day brings new challenges and discoveries. That about wraps up today's Daily News Roundup.
We've covered a lot of ground, from the Middle East to the U.S., from political assassinations to cryptocurrency, and even the possibility of life on other planets.
It's a lot to keep up with. But we hope you found it informative.
And maybe even a little bit thought-provoking.
We'll be back tomorrow with more news from around the world. Until then, stay informed and stay curious.